happy to share their experiences. And some of those guys would tell me that they were going out with 3 or 4 different women a night, and what they did 8 or 10 times a night, they said. And my eyes got to be that big around. Now that's it. And I couldn't wait, I never could live up to those ideals, and I tried to. And I'm sober in Alcoholics Anonymous about 3 years before I figured out that they were lying to me. Or at least I hope they were lying to me. And I'll never forget, I got married and did real good for a couple of years. And I went out on my wife one night, and the next day I felt bad. I didn't know you were supposed to feel bad. I did. It's supposed to keep you from doing that kind of stuff. And I felt real bad. And the next time I went out, it wasn't quite so bad as it was the first time. And the next time I went out, it wasn't quite so bad as it was the third time. And as the years went by, it got where it didn't hurt at all. And then one day I found myself drinking for oblivion. See, if you don't have any principles to live by, then you don't have any reasons to live. Such are principles. And that's why principles are so important to us. I compromise every principle known to man and God prior to AA. I don't do those things today at all. Don't compromise those things. And Charlie likes me to tell you, the first time I had sex, I was selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate, and I was also alone. I don't think you want me to tell you anything about it.
That's why he's wearing glasses today, too. I know from experience. Every time we say that, I look out there and about a dozen of you guys have jerked your glasses off and put them in your pocket.
You get that? You jerked your glasses off?
Now we see.
Keep coming back, Joe.
Now we see the same set of instructions to review our past sex life as we did for resentments and fears, just worded a little differently, which is Bill's way of doing it. He said we reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? That's column 5. Whom had we hurt? That's column 1. Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? That's column 4. Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. So once again, to avoid any confusion, we just made up another little inventory sheet called a review of our own sex conduct. Column 1, who did I hurt? I doubt if there's anybody in this room this morning that ever hurt anybody in the sexual area that we don't know just exactly who that was. That seems to be a form of knowledge that all of us seem to have. There may be a little question sometimes as, well, what do we do to hurt other people sexually? And we can hurt them in many different ways. For instance, if I'm in a married relationship and I go outside of my marriage and I have sex out there and my wife finds out about it, then surely I've hurt my wife. I've created a problem for her. If not physically, at least emotionally. If there's children in my home and that sexual escapade creates a real rift between my wife and I've hurt my children by the same thing. If the lady I had sex with out there, if it becomes common knowledge, I've hurt her also. And if she has a husband and children, I've hurt them too. One sex act can hurt several different people. Sometimes we hurt people in the sexual area simply by demanding more than our fair share. Maybe our partner isn't too great and wanting to have sex every time we want to, and instead of considering their needs and wants, we selfishly demand they have sex with us when they really don't want to. Surely we create a problem for them. If not physically, at least emotionally. Sometimes we hurt people in the sexual area by demanding they do things with us sexually they really don't want to do. And again, rather than consider their needs and wants, we selfishly demand those things. Surely we create a problem for them, if not physically, at least emotionally. Many, many ways we hurt people in the sexual area. I think we all know pretty well what they are. Column 1, we simply make a list of those we've hurt. Column 2, by the side of each name I put down, what did I do? Did I commit adultery? Did I demand they have sex in ways they didn't want to? What did I do to hurt them? If I remember who I hurt, I also remember what I did to hurt them. Column 1 and 2 is very, very simple. We just take it out of our head, put it down on paper. Column 3. Which part of self is involved here? Now, I think this might be one of the most revealing things we can ever do for ourselves. You know, you would think if I hurt somebody in the sexual area, it would always be caused by the sex instinct. And probably once in a while that's true. But if I carefully look at these things, I think I'm going to find in most cases the other two basic instincts are involved just as much as the sex instinct, maybe even more so, and maybe sex really didn't have a hell of a lot to do with it. Now, I'm going to express an opinion. I'll be sure everybody understands now this is my opinion, not AA's, not Joe's, not any, just mine. I'm of the opinion today that God gave us the sex urge so that we could reproduce ourselves. The human race would fail to survive without it. I'm also convinced He made it a very enjoyable thing, so we would do so. I don't think you and I would do the kind of work involved in sex if we didn't get something out of it. And that great feeling we get at the moment of successful completion of the sex act is one of the greatest feelings a human being can experience. Now, if we're doing sex for purposes other than reproduction or enjoyment, we just might be doing sex for purposes other than what God intended. For instance, sometimes we're just lonesome, and we just want somebody to pay attention to us. And we found out a long time ago that we can give sex and buy back a personal relationship. Now, that has nothing to do with reproduction or enjoyment. That's to fulfill a part of the social instinct. And sex really doesn't have anything to do with that other than fulfilling part of the social instinct. Sometimes we give sex to buy material security. Maybe we're in a sexual situation we really would rather not even be in. But we found out a long time ago we are so overly dependent upon another human being for our material well-being that we give sex to buy back material security. That has nothing to do with reproduction or enjoyment. That's to fulfill a part of the social or the security instinct. Sometimes we use sex to get even with another human being. Maybe we find out our partner's gone out and done something they shouldn't do, and it infuriates the hell out of us, and we say we'll show them, and we'll go out and we'll do the same identical thing. And the fallacy in it is after we've done it, we can't afford to tell them about it. But we didn't use sex there to enjoy, nor to reproduce. We used it to get even with another human being, forcing our will or trying to. Sometimes we use sex purely to force our will on another human being. Maybe our partner isn't doing what we think they ought to do. And we say we'll show them, we'll just cut them off at the pass, and we won't let them have any sex till they come around to our way of thinking. Now, we men aren't very good at that. We only last 2 or 3 days. But you girls have honed it to perfection. You know exactly how to do that. And if it worked that good for me, I'd probably do it too. You know. But that's not to reproduce. That's not to enjoy. That's to force our will on another human being. I was absolutely amazed as I filled out the third column to see what I was really doing with sex and why I was doing it. 2 things happened to me almost automatically. The first thing that happened to me in the third column is a lot of my guilt began to disappear. I thought I was just a dirty, rotten, no-good SOB. But I found out that isn't true. That I use sex for purposes other than what God intended, not because I'm a bad human being, but because I'm a sick human being. And I needed that sex to fulfill the other basic instincts of life, more so than sex. The second thing that happened to me in that third column is it began to look pretty stupid for using sex for what I was using it for. You see, I always thought I was oversexed. No, I wasn't oversexed. I was undersecure. And I was using sex to build my security, etc., and that began to look pretty stupid to do so. And then the desire to go do it at the wrong time, in the wrong place, with the wrong people, began to become less and less and less. Right here in this third column, I began to get a little handle on this thing. I think it's one of the greatest things we can do for ourselves. We men, we primarily, I don't know about you women, but we men, we primarily use sex to build our self-esteem. We were not oversexed at all. We used it to build our ego, to build our self-esteem. Hell, we used to go out with those young girls and do a little something with them, and hell, we just couldn't hardly wait to tell the other guys how great a man we really were, you know. We boys called that John Wayneism. I don't know what you girls called it, but some of you tell me you use sex for the same purposes, you know, to build your self-esteem. Jane Wayne, Joe says. Column 4. What feelings did I create in others? Did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? What should I have done instead? Beside each one of these sexual instances, we fill out that column 4, and we put down what should we have done instead. You know, we're trying to develop a new sex life in the future, where we can still engage in it, enjoy it, but not hurt other people. So not only are we looking at what we've done to hurt another human being, we're looking at what we should have done instead, and maybe start changing our ideals in the future. Column 5. Which character defect is involved? Same old character defects. If I wasn't so selfish, I wouldn't be going out there doing those things that might hurt my wife, my children, and other people. If I wasn't so dishonest, I wouldn't be sneaking around behind my wife's back lying to her anyhow. If I wasn't so afraid of facing life without that extramarital sex, if I wasn't so selfish, self-seeking, and frightened, I wouldn't be doing those things. If I wasn't so inconsiderate of other human beings, I wouldn't be doing the things that's going to end up hurting other people. But you can bet your boots, if I stay selfish, if I stay dishonest, if I stay self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate, I'm going to keep right on doing the same old things. I'm going to keep right on hurting people. And they're going to retaliate. And I'm going to resent. And I'm going to end up getting drunk over it. Even if they don't retaliate, I'm scared to death of what they're going to do when they do find out. Plus the remorse and the guilt just literally eats us up. I don't think we pay enough attention in AA to remorse and guilt. You know, we do have a conscience. We're not drunken bones. And most of us, those things that we've done to hurt other people, and we know we've done them, the remorse and the guilt just literally eats us up and blocks us off from having any peace of mind, period. So this is the way we review our own sex conduct of the past. Once again, we're doing step 4. This is a sexual harms part. Out in the 5th column, we now see the exact nature of the wrong. The sexual thing that I did to hurt another human being is the wrong, but what's the inherent characteristic of it? What's within me that causes that? In the 5th, for step 5. In the 5th column, I see the character defects I'm going to be willing to turn loose of in 6. In the 5th column, I'm going to see the shortcomings and ask God to take away in 7. And quite naturally, all the names in column 1 will come off of this sheet and be added to the sheet later on to be used for steps 8 and 9. And what really amazed me this time is I kept seeing several of the same names appearing on this sheet too. I resented Barbara, I feared Barbara, and I certainly hurt her in this area. I resented the Internal Revenue Service. I feared the Internal Revenue Service. I had them on this sheet because I gave them a pretty good screwing before I got through with them, too. Just kidding. Now,
there's a couple Internal Revenue Service people.
Yeah, I was always afraid somebody might be in here from the Internal Revenue Service. Now we're going to see, for sex, we're going to see several prayers. We had one for resentments, one for fears. Now let's see how many times we're going to pray about sex.
3 different times. In this way, the way we just talked about, in this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? The first prayer. We asked God to mold our ideals and to help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly nor selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we've done harm, provided we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. More prayer. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. Now, God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with other persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice.
This is an area where I don't think we need a whole lot of advice. I think each one of us, deep down inside, we know. We know what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. I've never been in a sexual situation yet that was wrong, that I didn't know it was wrong before I ever got into it. Didn't keep me from getting into it. But I knew it was wrong before I did. And if you start asking other people for sexual advice, if you ask 6 different people about a particular problem, you're probably going to get a half a dozen different answers. You're still going to have to decide which one to follow. And besides that, I can't think of a worse place in the world to get sexual advice than an Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a hell of a place to look for it.
Would anybody like to counsel with me?
Let's just listen to that little voice inside. We already know what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing.
Now, suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Well, does this mean we're going to get drunk? Well, some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. If we're sorry for what we've done and have an honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we'll be forgiven and have learned our lesson. Now, if we're not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we're quite sure to drink. We're not theorizing. These are facts of our experience. Now, to sum up about sex, more prayer. We earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the horny condition. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache.
Old Bill used some fancy words in here, didn't he? Yeah. Okay, now we've looked at our resentments, gotten rid of some of them, replaced them with love, patience, tolerance, compassion, and goodwill. We've looked at our fear, gotten rid of most of that, replaced it with faith and courage. We've looked at our sexual harms that we've done to others and saw the truth behind them. We've taken names out of column 1 from all 3 of those sheets to be used for 8 and 9 at a later date. But when you get to step 8, it says we have the list. We made it and we took 4. There's probably some other people we've harmed in ways other than sexual. Maybe we've hurt them physically. Maybe we undercut them and took their job away from them. Maybe we stole money from them. We hurt many, many people in many ways other than sexual. So to complete this thing, we're going to make one more suggestion to you. and another little inventory sheet, and we called it a review of harms other than sexual. And we fill it out just like we filled out the others. Column 1, who did it hurt? And this is all those people we've hurt in ways other than sexual. Column 2, what did I do? Did I undercut them, take their job away from them? Did I hurt them physically? Did I steal from them? How did I hurt them, whoever it was? Column 3, which part of self caused me to do that? You know, I can't hurt another human being unless one of my basic instincts are out of control. If my social instinct is out of control, my self-esteem, my personal relationships, my ambitions, prestige, power, if they're out of control, I'll end up hurting another person. Or if my security instinct is out of control, it causes me to lie and cheat and steal. If my sex instinct is out of control, it causes me to hurt other people. Everybody I've ever hurt, one of my basic instincts, or maybe all three, but at least one's going to be involved in what I did to them. Column 4, what feelings did I create in others? What should I have done instead? Column 5, which character defect is involved? Was it selfishness? Was it dishonesty? Was it self-seeking, frightened, or was it inconsiderate? You know, by the time we fill out all 4 of these sheets, we begin to see what that old personality has really done to us. We really begin to see by now what those character defects have caused. And we really need to begin to see that, by golly, we need to do something about their removal. Because we've seen this over and over and over. Resentments and fears and sex harms and harms other. Once again, we're doing step 4. Out in the 5th column, we see the information now for 5, 6, and 7. In the 1st column, those names come off of this sheet to be added to that sheet to be used later on for steps 8 and 9. And we're through with this sheet, then we have completed our inventory. We've looked at resentments, fears, sex harms, and harms other than sexual.
The question I have so far, have you seen any dirty, filthy, rotten things that we've wrote down? No. Has it been simple? Yes. We've been talking about this 2 hours yesterday and about an hour and a half this morning. That's 3.5 hours. It takes longer to explain it than it does to do it. Now that you know, you can go back to do this in just a little while if you want to get well. Some boy asked me a while ago, said, how long should I be sober before I do the 4th step? My stock answer is, well, how long do you want to stay sick? These steps are designed to help us get well in those areas. And nobody that I know of in AA, nobody has ever done this perfectly. We just do the best we can with what we have at the time. And we can improve on the process later. So don't wait to try to do it perfectly. Just do the best you can with it right now. That's all.
The book says if we've been thorough about our personal inventory, we've written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. He doesn't say it, but we've listed and analyzed our fears. We've listed and analyzed our sex harms. We've listed and analyzed our harms other than sexual. The word analyze simply means we've looked at the truth. That's all that means. A lot of people don't like that word, but it's Bill using another word for truth. We've taken a moral, truthful, honest, analytical inventory. We've begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We've commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. Now here's some promises. We've begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. You see, we don't have to wait to step 12 to get something about this. We're building the wonderfully effective spiritual structure, which is the spiritual experience or spiritual awakening. Our personality is changing as we go through these steps. For an alcoholic to learn patience, tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, man, that's a hell of a change already. We have listed the people we've hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. In this book you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. If you've already made a decision,
Step 3.
And an inventory of your grosser handicaps,
Step 4.
You have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. Our grosser handicaps:
resentment, fear, sexual harm, and harms done to others other than sexual.
Our grosser handicaps:
selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate attitudes.
See, the book recognizes that this is just a beginning. That we're never going to do this thing perfect. We got another step later on where we're going to redo this process for the rest of our lives. And we'll become better and better and better. The best thing we can do with step 4 is to do the best we can with step 4. And we get rid of some of these grosser handicaps, then that lets us go on with the rest of the program. But until we've done 4, we can't do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so on and so forth. So the best thing for us to do is get with it, do the best we can, get the results we can get, and get on with the rest of our program. Now, I don't know whether you all have noticed or not, but nearly all the information in the big book on sex is on page 69. I don't know that has any significance whatsoever, but that happens to be where it is. We heard a story about a young lady that came to AA and been sober 2 or 3 months, and she went to her sponsor and she said, "Sponsor, I've got a problem." Her sponsor said, "What is it?" She said, "Well, it's this sexual thing." She said, "I've never done anything in a sexual area except when I'm drinking. And when I'm sober, I just don't know what to do. I've never tried to attract another man or do anything at all. And I need some advice." And her sponsor says, "Well, go home and get out your big book. Go to page 69, read what it says, and it'll answer any problems you might have." So the young lady went home and got out her big book and proceeded to read, but she got confused on page numbers. Instead of page 69, she read page 96. Just for the hell of it, go to 96 for just a moment and see what she read. Just breeze right through 5 and get into 6 and 7 and probably run them about 10 minutes later. I think that's one of the most appropriate things I've ever read. It just goes on and on and on and on. Okay. We've completed our inventory. We've gathered up a bunch of information in that inventory. Now then, we need to start looking at what are we going to do with this information that we gathered up in our 4-step inventory. And let's go to page 72, and let's look at this next chapter.
It's called Into Action. Now, this is not into thinking. Into action. And action is always a magic word, and alcohol is synonymous. Having made our personal inventory, what we should really do about it? Well, we've been trying to get a new attitude. Remember again, ideas, emotions, and attitudes are what we're trying to get. And we're trying to get a new relationship with our Creator. Remember it said back on page 45, the main object of this book was to enable me to find a power greater than myself, which would solve my problem. So we're trying to get a new relationship with our Creator and discover the obstacles in our path. And what are those obstacles? Resentment and fear and harms done to others. We have admitted certain defects. And what are those defects? Selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate attitudes. We've ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We've put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we've admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the fifth step in the program recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter.
Okay, we got to stop down for just a moment. Look at a couple of words. We know that step 5 says, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. But you'll notice here in the narrative on step 5, he doesn't say the exact nature of our wrongs. He says the exact nature of our defects. And people used to ask Bill about that. They'd say, Bill, why did you use wrongs in the step? Yet in the narrative on that step, you used the word defects. By the way, Bill, what's the difference anyhow between a wrong, a defect, a shortcoming, or whatever? And we've known 2 ladies that worked with and for Bill for years, and they both tell us the same thing, that Bill would kind of rear back and smile. And he would say, when I took English and writing courses in college, they taught me not to use the same words over and over and over. It shows how dumb you are.
You know.
He said there are no differences in these things. He said we're going to find those things that block us off from God in step 4. We're going to talk about them to another human being in step 5. We're going to become willing to have God take them away in step 6. We're going to ask Him to do so in step 7. And he said you can call them anything you want to. A wrong, a fault, a defect, a mistake, a personality flaw, or whatever you wish to call them. And we'll notice on the next couple of pages now he does that. He uses these words interchangeably back and forth. When he wrote the 12 and 12, some 12 or 13 years later, not only does it do it there, but he does it even worse in the 12 and 12. So we are convinced that it doesn't make any difference what we call them. They are the things we've found, we'll talk about, we'll be willing to get rid of, and we'll ask God to take them away. Call them anything we want to.
The book said this is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects. Did it again right there.
Did it again right there.
With another person. We think we've done well enough at admitting these things to ourselves. Well, there's doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find that as solitary self-appraisal, insufficient. Many of us aren't necessary to go much further. We'll be more reconciled discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. The best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Now here, a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. I did the very best I could do with my limited knowledge of this inventory process. Now I take it to another human being, and they can help me see things within me that I couldn't see, because a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. To give you an example, I know several of these guys around here, from a couple of them back there from New York. It's obvious to me that they got defects of character.
Here's the one right here on the second row. We can see him.
There's nothing between me and them or you except air. But between me and me is a lifetime of rationalization and justification. And sometimes I just cannot see past that. And I need another human being who is objective, who can look at me and see things within me that I couldn't see. Now, these forms become very, very important at the area of the fifth step, because now we can start right here on column 1. Instead of going top to bottom as we have been going, now we go left to right. And we can discuss these items and these situations from left to right all we want to, all the way across. We can tell someone else all our life story, resentment-wise. Talk about that all you want to. And go to the next one and talk about that all you want to, all the way across, left to right. And your sponsor, if he's like mine, he'll look at me and help me see things I couldn't see, and help me change a few things in here that I couldn't see. And then that way I've gleaned all the information that I can. But these forms become very, very important in the area of the fifth step. And besides that, it helps us to keep in some kind of a order. Have you ever took a fifth step where you jumped around all over the place and you never did know where you were? But this here said, no, wait a minute, we're going to talk about this column now. you see, and go all the way across. Very, very valuable.
On page 73, that paragraph at the top of the page, the last sentence, said, but they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty, and we sent to find it necessary and to tell someone else all their life story. There's what we got the idea that we needed to write our life story for step 4. And as we said before, 95% of our life story really doesn't have anything to do with our alcoholism. But I tell you what we've done. If we've done the inventory the way the big book says, we're now going to share all our life story, resentment-wise, with God and another human being. We're going to share all our life story, fears-wise, with God and another human being. We're going to share all of our sexual wrongs, all our life story sexual wrongs, with God and another human being. We're going to share harms done to others throughout our life with God and another human being. Because you see, my resentments didn't come just yesterday. They've been popping in my head as far back as I can remember, from the time I was a little child. My fears were the same way. My wrongs were the same way. I've been hurting people all my life. My mama said to me one time, she said, Charlie, you're the meanest kid I ever saw. She said, I had a little trouble loving you myself. And when Mama has trouble loving you, you better look out. There's something going on there that's not right. And that makes my life story. My life story is involved with the resentments and the fears and the harms I've done to others and the guilt and remorse and all that crap. You know, I've shared all my life story. I don't have any problem with that statement. Now here's why we need to take it, with another human being especially.
Before we move on, these are just little notes to me, to remind me to talk about them. Otherwise I'd forget. So just look at it that way. Little reminders to yourself to talk about them in step 5. That's all.
More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He's very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes the fellas to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. Coming to his senses, he revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes his memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension, and that makes for more drinking. Psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but few instances where we've given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we were honest with no one else. You know, I think we need to face the fact that we alcoholics have become the world's greatest con artist. You have to if you're going to be a practicing alcoholic. You got to learn how to lie. You got to learn how to cheat. You got to learn how to manipulate. You got to learn how to steal. And I think the one we have to con the most is ourselves. I don't think we could live with ourselves if we had to honestly see what's going on when we're out there drinking. But you see, we never have to see that. We've got this convenient little thing called resentments, where we play them over and over in our head and transfer all blame to others and make ourselves as pure as the driven snow and go ahead and keep living the kind of life we were wanting to live. It's impossible for us to be honest with ourselves. It's impossible for any human being to be absolutely honest with themselves, because the basic instincts play into it, rationalization and justification comes into it, and we just can't see the truth. Now, what I need to do now, I've done the best I can in 4. I've been as honest as I can be with me. Now I need to take it to another human being, one who's walked this walk before me, who understands 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, according to the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, and have them help me see those things I can't see about me. They're not going to change column 1. Not going to change column 2. Probably going to change some things in column 3. I used to say this was caused by the sex instinct. He said, no. No, it's not. He said, you're just trying to build your ego here. You're trying to do this or this or that. And he helped me see what I couldn't see. Probably not going to change column 4. May change some things in column 5. You know, I said this was caused by fear, and he said, it's plain damn dishonesty. That's all this is. And he helped me see things about me I can't see. That's the advantage of step 5.
I love this, what we're talking about. I went to a psychiatrist prior to AA, and he said, well, Mr. McCoy, I like that. I was paying him $75 an hour. And what seemed to be your problem, and I don't know what my problem is. I've never done this inventory process, so I told him what I thought it was, and it was her. And if you live with her, you drink too, I told him. And I feel bad all the time. And he thought I had a Valium deficiency. Wrote me a prescription for that. And I really got crazy then. That's another story. But since I've done this inventory process, and since I've talked about it with another human being, I don't have to have those things. See, I know what my problem is today. My sponsors definitely know what my problems are.
Now, on page 74 in the big book, it talks about who to select to take step 5 with. Now, this was written in 1937, 38, and 39. And the first person in Florida didn't have an AA sponsor. The first person in California didn't have an AA sponsor. The first person in Texas didn't have an AA sponsor. So it was difficult for them to find somebody to do step 5 with. That's what that page pertains to. Today, that's no longer true. We've got plenty of good AA sponsors in AA today who understands this program, who knows how to help me see the things I can't see about myself. That's the main criteria on who we're going to select. Now, I know confession is good for the soul. I know if we belong to a religion requires it, we better go do that. But I still think we need to then take this to somebody in AA, preferably our sponsors, to help us really see the things that we need to change. That's the main criteria. Again, another reason we need to take this. This is another attempt to start fitting ourselves back together as God intended for us to be. You know, we are tridimensional creatures. We live with the spirit. We live with the mind. We live with our fellow human beings. In step 3, it suggested we pray the third step prayer in the company of other human beings, putting us back together with God and other human beings. This is another effort now to start rejoining the human race, to start getting well in all 3 dimensions. Page 75 tells us how to do this, the second paragraph.
When we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. There's that time factor again. We have a written inventory and prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize they were engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. I called Franklin and said, Franklin, I'd like to do the 5th step whenever you're available. And he told me, well, come on over. He lived in Olive Branch, Mississippi, about a 9-hour drive from my house. So I drove over there on Friday, and we sat down there, and I said, I'm ready to do the 5th step. He said, I know you are, but first of all, let's you and I do the 3rd step prayer together. Ask God to be a part of this process. And we did. And we set about to do that off and on all weekend. When I left there on Sunday going home, I felt a real relief within me. I'd always wanted to get everything back to zero with everything and every situation. And I could see the steps coming up. And I was anxious to do that. I wanted to get it squared away. I wanted to get those things squared away and for me to get well and to live without guilt, shame, and remorse. And my mind racing uncontrollably. Man, I was sick for a long time. I'm not that way today. And started with these processes that we're going through.
Second paragraph.
So we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once having taken this step withholding nothing, we are delighted.
Here's some more promises.
We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. we begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience.
Step 2, we came to believe. Now then, we begin to have a spiritual experience.
The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we're on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. Now, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour.
He gives us a little rest stop here, doesn't he? But he didn't say 32 days. He said 1 hour. Carefully viewing what we've done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. We don't know Him yet, but we know Him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals. Now there he is again, repeating himself but using a different word. He don't want to say steps again because he just said it, so he'll call them proposals here. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we've omitted anything, for we're building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? And again, we're building that wonderfully effective spiritual structure. Step 1, willingness was the foundation. Step 2, believing was the cornerstone. Step 3, he told us we're building an arch. And at step 3 was the keystone. Now we put 2 more stones in place, 4 and 5. If we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We're going to run you over here for just a few minutes, with your permission. If we can answer our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all of the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something and will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. Now, that's all of step 6, and He didn't say a word about defects of character. He did say those things we have admitted are objectionable. Now, surely, on those inventory sheets, when we got into that 5th column, and we kept seeing what that old selfish attitude, that old dishonesty, that old self-seeking, frightened character, that old inconsideration, we begin to see that those are the things that caused us to do the things that hurt other people, etc., etc. Then surely those things have become objectionable to us by now. Are we now ready to turn them loose? If we are, we've already done step 6. But the book recognizes self cannot overcome self. That we're always going to need some help. It said we still cling to something, we'll not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. You know, you would think when we see what those things do to us, we would be more than willing to turn them loose. But we human beings are funny things. Sometimes we would rather sit in today's pain and suffering because we've kind of learned how to live with that. Sometimes we'd rather sit in today's pain and suffering than take a chance on changing in the future because we don't know what change is going to bring. And fear can stop us right here. If I'm going to have to get rid of my selfishness, then how am I going to get what I want? If I'm going to have to get rid of my dishonesty, how am I going to make a living? Christ, I don't know anything about honesty when I get to AA. If I'm going to have to get rid of my self-seeking, frightened condition, where am I going to get the courage to do the things I need to do? If I'm going to have to start considering other people ahead of myself, then who's going to take care of me? And sometimes we're stymied right here. We're frozen right here because we're not quite ready to turn them loose. They haven't really become objectionable to us enough. And even sober in AA, we'll keep on doing the same damn things we've always done. And the pain gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper until these things become objectionable to us too. Just like our drinking become objectionable to us. And the book recognizes we'll have a problem with this and says if we're not ready, we ask God to help us be willing to be ready. And eventually the willingness comes. Then he says, when ready, we say something like this. My Creator, I'm now willing you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character. Whoa! We're in step 7 now. And step 7 said shortcomings. But here he's used defects of character. You see what he's done to us? Confused the hell out of us for years. Till we finally found that. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We then completed step 7. Bang, bang. Are you ready to have God remove all those defects of character? Then you're through with 6. Have you humbly asked Him to do so? Yes. Then you've taken 7. But don't make the mistake I made. Because I knew God being all-powerful. And I knew that He could do anything He wanted to do. That all I had to do was turn to Him and say, okay, God, here I am, warts and all. Give me the $29.95 special. And zap me and make me as pure as the driven snow. And I'd never have to worry about this stuff again. No, it don't work that way. God will do for me what I cannot do for myself. He will not do for me what I can do for myself. He cannot remove selfishness from my mind and leave a blank spot. I've got enough holes in my head already. If selfishness is to be removed, it must be replaced with something else. And the only thing that can replace it will be the opposite. If I want God to take away my selfishness, then I must gather all the strength that I can get and all the help I can get from God and try to force myself to be unselfish in every situation that comes up. And slowly, 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 as I practice and practice and practice and practice, the old idea dies and a new idea takes its place. In most instances today, I'm a relatively unselfish human being. But I've worked at it for a long time. If I want Him to take away my dishonesty, then I must force myself in every situation that comes up to practice honesty. And I can't do that by myself. I've got to have God's help. But as He removes and as I practice, slowly, 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 I have become a more honest human being. Not always honest, but most of the time. If I want Him to take away my self-seeking, frightened character, then I've got to start practicing courage. I've got to start kicking myself in the butt and make myself do things I was afraid to do, and just as importantly, quit doing some of the things that I was afraid to quit. And slowly, 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 I find that the self-seeking, frightened character has become one who now acts with faith and courage. If I want Him to take away inconsideration, then I must, with God's help, start considering other people and their needs and their wants, and slowly, 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 over a period of time, I change. The book says we were reborn. And that's what it's talking about. I'm not what I used to be. I've been reborn. Not in my body, but in my mind. My whole attitude, my whole emotions, my whole ideas, over a period of time has changed. As God removes and as I practice, I slowly become another human being. I think we're the luckiest people in the world. I think we're the luckiest people in the world. Most people out there are sick. And most of them are going to the grave not even knowing they're sick. We not only know we're sick. Through this little program we've been talking about, we have figured out why we're sick. And now we have a way to do something about that. And we don't have to go to the grave sick. We can go to the grave happy and peaceful and free with serenity and peace of mind. We have the opportunity to live 2 lifetimes in 1 lifetime. Most human beings never get that opportunity. I am not what I used to be. I have been reborn. And right here is where it starts taking place, Joe.
There's always a paradox in AA, isn't there? It's always backwards from what I thought it was. To give you an example, how many of you ever called your sponsor so you could listen? That's a paradox. And the paradox here is that they've used the doctor's opinion in the first 4 chapters to do steps 1 and 2. 3.5 pages to do step 3, 4 pages to do step 4, 8 pages to do step 4, 4 pages to do step 5, and a whole chapter on working with others. The paradox is this, that 2 of the biggest steps in all of Alcoholics Anonymous is on 2 little paragraphs. These are the steps that Bill added to the tenets of the Oxford group. 2 little steps, the biggest ones in all of Alcoholics Anonymous. Time I got to this step, a little doubt began to creep up in my mind. Can God really do this? Really? And I had to reaffirm a statement that I read earlier. It said God either is or he isn't. What was my choice to be? And I chose to believe that he could. You know, these are the tools of change, the tools of acceptance, the change from what I had become to that which God intends for me to be. Tools of acceptance. There was a little movement going on here a few years ago about acceptance. People walking around, I'm just accepting everything. No, acceptance is not an event. It's a process we have to go through. 6 and 7, 4, 5, 6, and 7 is the process. And then we can accept. There was a guy in that other big book, his name was Judas. Y'all remember Judas? Judas could not accept what he had done. And he killed himself. That's why 6 and 7 is so big. We have to be able to accept what we have done and go through the process. There's another story in that book. I think Bill got this. This guy's name was Saul, S-A-U-L. He was riding the book says, his ass on the way to Damascus. Big bolt of lightning come down, knocked him off his ass on his ass, is the way I read it. He's standing there dusting himself off, and a big booming voice said, "Hey, Saul, can we talk?" He got his attention. He said, "Yeah, we can talk." He said, "What do you want to talk about?" He said, "Saul, you've been a very angry, selfish, dishonest individual, and you've harmed an awful lot of people with those attitudes, and I want you to quit doing that." And he said, "Well, how do I quit doing that?" He said, "Basically, you do 6 and 7. He didn't say that, but you do these things. And when you do these things, you'll make a change. And when you've changed, then we'll call you Paul." And we all know that Paul was one of the greatest writers the world has ever known. One time in a little town in Corinthia, they asked Paul, said, "Hey, Paul, what's the secret to life?" Everybody wants to know that, don't they? And he said, "The secret to life is daily dying." The old Saul had to die so the new Paul could come alive. 6 and 7, 2 of the biggest steps in all of Alcoholics Anonymous. To change from what I had become to that which God intends for me to be. And I am making that change still. Thank God.
Now, one more little thing and then we're through. Now that you know these things, and now that you can, with God's help, change, that means from this day on, you are responsible for what you are. You can't blame it on Mother and Daddy anymore. Can't blame it on God. Can't blame it on him or her. You can't blame it on society. If you stay the way you are and don't change, it must be because that's the way you want to be. We just don't have any excuses anymore. No rationalization or justification or victimization. If we stay sick, it's because we want to stay sick. We have the opportunity to change through these steps that we've been talking about. Thank you all for being here. Sorry we ran you over.
Well, late.
Thank you, Joe and Charlie. So how about we take a moment of silence so we can really focus in, sit down, quiet up a little bit. Let's take a moment of silence and then we'll say the Serenity Prayer. That seems to calm everybody down. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. So we have a real treat. One of the ways Glenn gets out of the house to go places is he brings his wife with him. We understand that now. No, that's how you can get away on a lot of weekends. That's a good idea. More people should do that. And be with her, right? Because she's a real joy and treat to be around. So please help me welcome our Janie, and she's going to do something nice for us.
Hi, my name is Jane, and I've been asked to help us along this afternoon with Somewhere Down in Church Basements. Somewhere down in church basements, way below, there's a place where I never thought I would ever go. Somewhere down in church basements lives repair, and if you think that you need help, you will find it there. We were so sick we thought without the booze our lives would just about be over. But through the 12 steps of AA we're free with dignity today, 'cause we are sober. Somewhere down in church basements we are strong, and at last we have found the place where we do belong. Be sure your life will be okay as long as you don't drink today.
Thank you very much, Janie. She's also available for graduations and weddings coming up. Get a card from her at the end of the couple of hands going up there. So please help me welcome Joe and Charlie.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Charlie Parman. I'm a very grateful recovering alcoholic. Still got the same number of days of sobriety that I had this morning. I hadn't got drunk yet. Tomorrow, as we close, unless something happens to prevent it, Jane is going to sing Amazing Grace. I'll guarantee you, if you sit in here and listen to her, you're going to cry before you're through. I've heard it. I've heard her do it over and over, and I just bawl like a baby every time she does it. Got a beautiful, beautiful voice for Amazing Grace. Okay, we've done a lot of work. As far as the big book is concerned, as far as the program is concerned, we did a lot of work in our inventory process. And for the first time for most of us, we finally learned how to take the inventory according to the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. And we learned how simple it really is. There's nothing extremely complicated about it. We've learned there's nothing to be afraid of as we take our inventory from the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. We looked at our resentments. We looked at our fears. We looked at our sexual harms done to others. We looked at harms done to others any way other than sexual. And through that process, we began to not only see the truth about those things, we began to see the part that we played in them. And we begin to see the fact that we're going to have to start changing some things in our personality if we want to live in the future free from anger and worry and depression and etc. We had some positive results. We got rid of resentments, and they were replaced with love, patience, tolerance, compassion, and goodwill. We got rid of fear, and that was replaced with faith and courage. At least we got rid of resentments and fear to the level that God intended for it to be. And as we said before, we'll never be completely free of it, because we can use those things for a good, worthwhile purpose if we use them as God intended. We also took a little look at the people we've harmed and the guilt and remorse associated with those things. But we really haven't done anything yet to get rid of that guilt and remorse. The storeroom back here in the back of my store that's filled with guilt and remorse, even though I've looked at the people I've harmed, both sexually and otherwise, I still haven't done anything to remove that guilt and that remorse. And if I want God to direct my thinking in that part of my mind, then just like with resentments and just like with fears, I'm going to have to do something about the removal of that guilt and remorse. And when it's gone, then God's thinking can enter that part of my mind also. Now, it's been known to the human race for thousands of years that the way you get rid of guilt and remorse associated with the harms, the things we've done to hurt other people, is you make restitution for those things. And the Oxford Group step was called restitution. And the alcoholics didn't like the word restitution. I don't like the word restitution today. So Bill took that word restitution and he changed it and used a different word and he called it amends. And he changed it into 2 steps. He saw the need for us to first get ready to make restitution. Just like he saw the need for us to get ready to have character defects removed in step 6. And he saw the need for us to get ready to make restitution. And he uses step 8 in order to get us ready. Then, in step 9, we make the restitution, or we make the amends. Now, I've never seen anybody in AA that really looked forward to steps 8 and 9. I've seen 1,000 newcomers read the steps off the wall, but I've never heard one of them say, those steps 8 and 9 look like they're going to be fun. I can hardly wait to get there. No, nobody likes to make restitution. Nobody likes to make amends. Nobody likes to go to the other human beings and make apologies for things that we've done in the past. Nobody likes to take from today's living economically and pay back for things we've done in the past economically. The only question is, can we afford not to do that? And it looks like if we don't do something about that, and we don't get rid of that guilt and remorse, it starts backing up in our mind. And we start resenting other people again. And we start doing things we shouldn't be doing, and we start being filled with fear. And the next thing you know, that backs us off and blocks us up from the sunlight of the Spirit. And the next thing you know, we get drunk all over again. The best example that I know of is Dr. Bob. You know, when we read the foreword to the second edition, it sounded like Bill called on Dr. Bob. Bob got sober and he never drank again. That isn't true. Not too long after Bill called on Dr. Bob, Dr. Bob found it necessary, he thought, to go to a medical convention over in New Jersey. And his wife Ann begged him not to go. And she begged Bill not to let him go. Said if he goes over there, he'll get drunk just sure as anything. He does it every year. And Bill said, let him go. Said he's going to have to learn to live in society where there's always going to be plenty of alcohol. And if he gets drunk, we'll do something about it when he gets back. And Dr. Bob went to the medical convention, and sure enough, he got drunk while he was there. And he came back, and he ended up at his nurse's home. And she called Ann and said, come over and get him. He's drunk. And by the way, Ann, you've got to get him sober. He's got surgery scheduled for tomorrow morning. And we got to get him in shape for the surgery. Now, Dr. Bob was a proctologist. I'm glad he wasn't working on my procto the next morning, I'll guarantee you. So Ann and Bill got him and brought him home, coffeed him, walked him, got him as sober as they possibly could. The next morning, Bill took him to the hospital. In the parking lot of the hospital, Dr. Bob said, Bill, I can't do this surgery. I'm sick and I'm shaking and I'm trembling and I'm going to hurt somebody. Bill said, you'll be okay. And reached in the back seat of the car and got out a bottle of beer. Popped the top on it and said, drink this and you'll be all right. Dr. Bob drank the beer, went upstairs, did the surgery, and sure enough, it came out okay. Bill's waiting for him down in the parking lot. Dr. Bob disappears. Bill is waiting for hours. He assumes that the beer has triggered the allergy and Bob's off and running. So he finally goes back to Dr. Bob's house. Bill and Ann wait there all evening. Late evening, Dr. Bob shows up. And he's sober. And Bill said, where in the hell have you been? And he said, I've been going up and down, both sides of the street, making my amends to people I've hurt in the past. That was the last drink that Dr. Bob ever took. That was June the 10th, 1935. And that was the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous. You see, he had never been able to fully apply that Oxford group program. That amends thing, he was scared to death of it. Because he knew that if people found out he was alcoholic, he would lose what little bit of practice he had left. He didn't know that everybody else already knew that anyhow. But the day he mustered the courage to make his amends was the day he took his last drink. And it was good enough for Dr. Bob. It's probably good enough for me too. Let's spend a few minutes here looking at steps 8 and steps 9, Joe.
I love step 8 and 9 today, but didn't in the beginning. But my last 2 or 3 years of drinking, I had horrendous hangovers. I didn't ever have them until then. Horrendous hangovers. I couldn't hardly get my head off the pillow or off the floor wherever I was. But that wasn't the reason that caused me to want to quit drinking. And I got real sick, physically sick. I mean really physically sick. One morning I was in the shower and kind of hiccuped and I threw up 3 pints of blood. That wasn't what caused me to want to quit drinking, as serious as that was. But what really caused me to want to quit drinking was the guilt, shame, and remorse that I had as a result of the harms I'd done to other people. I just couldn't stand it anymore. And I wanted to get all that stuff straightened out somehow, some way. I didn't know how that was going to happen. And I'll never forget that morning. I knew that if my life was ever going to get straightened out and I was going to set it right with all those people, I was going to have to stay sober. And I knew that I could not stay sober. I had already tried to stay sober and could not. But somehow that morning, and I didn't pray for this, somehow that morning it just came to me that if I'm going to get sober and get my life straightened out, God was going to have to be a part of it. And nobody had to tell me that. And I did 2 things that morning that I don't do. One is I asked God to help me to find a way to stay sober and get my life straightened out. And if he would do that for me, then I would do whatever I could from him from this day forward. I made a deal. Looked like a couple hours later, didn't look like nobody was going to help me. And I remember my little friend George, who told me he was in AA. And I did something else that I don't do. I called George and I said, George, are you still going to AA? He said he was. I said, would you help me? I don't ask people to help me. up till that point. Remember, I don't need God nothing or nobody. But that morning I did two things I don't do. Ask God and help another human being. George came over to my house and stayed with me the next 3 days, sobered me up. And I really got sick then. He stayed with me day and night, wiping the sweat off my brow and stuff off my mouth, sobered me up. Took me my very first AA meeting, November the 3rd, 1973. And I haven't had a drink since that Sunday morning. Now we get around here to this making amends. And we'll talk a lot about that here a little bit. But making amends was the best thing that I ever did for me. To get rid of that guilt, shame, and remorse, the thing that was killing me. So let's look here on page 76. Generally, when people talk in a step study meeting about step 8, generally the conversation leaks over to step 9 on how they went about making amends. But step 8 is a definite step. It has to be done before we do step 9. He said, now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. 8 first. We have a list of all the persons we've harmed. And we take all those names off of that first column and put them on one long list. And to whom we are willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. See? We subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. 4 and 5. A drastic self-appraisal. Now we're about to go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which had accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. We need more prayer. A little leak there. And here's the prayer in step 8. You guys that's under that fire, you probably ought to move back. Or you can wait till it burns the top of your head. So some more prayer. A lot of prayer. So if we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning that we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol.
Again, we recognize that self-will cannot overcome self-will. The book again recognizes that nobody really wants to do this. And we have prayer involved in step 8. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. And sooner or later, the willingness will come. Now, I remember when I got ready to do steps 8 and step 9, I went to my sponsor. And I said, I don't believe I can do 8 and 9. And he said, why not? I said, because there's some people on my list that I owe amends to that they've hurt me too. And they've hurt me just as bad as I ever hurt them. And I'll be damned if I'm going to make any amends to them. He said, well, Charlie, as usual, you're getting the cart before the horse.